and welcome to another episode of our 10-minute podcast with Jonas and myself. And today we're going to talk about revenues. Are they really that important? So after COVID, a lot of companies have switched from growth to profitability and to focus on revenues and then making the most of those revenues. And it's been an issue for product management all along. Are we making money? How much are we making? Can we make some money? Will people pay? My personal view has always been that everything we do is kind of academic, from job ladders to Jira structures to anything else, until a user clicks on a button and gives us a credit card number. And so then you start realizing that you've delivered value that people are happy to pay for. So basically, I think we live for, as product managers, we sort of live for users to finally do a value transaction. And that's kind of my view, but I'll hand over to Jonas immediately because he's actually had a lot of experience with revenue. So Jonas, over to you. What do you think?
Thank you, Kristen. Yeah, maybe I have a lot of experience in losing revenue, but certainly I've had in quite a few of the roles I've had in the last couple of years. I've also had P&L responsibilities for the products. And it's true, it's a hugely important factor when you manage a product or a set of products. It is the moment of truth with regards to at what point will the user pay for the product or service that you're managing. The reason why that's important is that it is quite often kind of the balance between the value you generate for the user, the pain you solve, versus the friction of having to pay for that friction to be solved. It's also a proof of whether your product is commercially viable. Back to your point around the increased focus around profitability over growth generally in the market. And then it's also a period of risk where that the fact is that a lot of products in product history have failed to the extent that they either run out of money or they kind of are closed down because they might experience user growth, but they're not able to monetize it, and as such prove that they're commercially viable.
And you're right, because if you don't mind me jumping in,
No,
every time you ask users or people, how much would you pay? Would you pay 10? Would you pay 20? You get all these enthusiastic answers. When you put up a credit card form, though, and ask people to give you their credit card, 98% of people disappear, and you're left with a very small click-through rate. So it's a real proof, as you said, right? It's to check whether the value you bring to users is what they expect and whether they're ready to pay for it.
At some point during your product life cycle, either early on or later on as you experience user growth, you have to figure out what's your monetization model. Is it subscription? Is it a flat fee? And whatever it is, you kind of have to consider that in the way you evolve your product. On the roadmap level, you will also have to consider and make sure that you prioritize development in your product scope that enables you to monetize the product. That means that to make the payment experience frictionless, of course, make sure that the value or the premiumness you may achieve with using your product is explicit and clear, incentivizing users to pay.
I want to switch quickly to because we keep talking about user friction, etc., which is a very B2C thing. So I would like to switch to a B2B example quickly that I have from my career, where I headed up a targeting engine for advertisement, and we built it based on machine learning models. What our goal is to improve on the heuristic models, so the sort of historical heuristic models, and to basically create more value for everyone in the equation. And what was interesting is that we had big sales teams for selling the ad inventory, but what got us there is not just to make the machine learning and to make it sort of efficient and better and prove that we can get higher click-through rates or whatever else. What actually was successful for us is to look at users. And this was, in this case, not private users, private individuals, but it was big companies who were clients to buy ads, and we connected with the commercial teams, and we ended up working with them so closely that we figured out how to combine our machine learning capabilities on the technical side with the roadmap or the priorities, if you will, that the commercial teams had in terms of chasing opportunities. And we had this fantastic equation, a sort of flow within the company, which happens rarely, by the way, between product and commercial. I mean, if you're there, it's nirvana. But we managed the flow where our prioritization was influenced by our opportunities, and we managed to deliver a revenue growth that was enormous, tens of millions within 2 years. So we only managed to do it because we tuned into what the customers wanted, basically.
That's a brilliant example, Chris, and I think, sorry for jumping in, but I think that will also, and this is a topic you and I've discussed in a previous episode around stakeholder management, right? As a product leader, if you tie your product output to revenue output, then that makes stakeholder management much easier, right?
Yeah.
Because revenue is king.
Yeah. Yeah, you could also say that innovation becomes a bit riskier, right? But is if you're chasing only the money. But I think when you have these phases where you do need to chase money and figure out how to make more revenue or better revenue, then it definitely is something you have to spend a lot of time on. But it pays off massively. So shall we also look at another example, maybe? Do you want to go over an example that may not have worked out so well, for example?
It's actually it's a case I would call unresolved and still ongoing. I'm sure most people working within the product industry are aware around the challenges around neobanks. In the past 10 years, right? They've gone from stellar growth to become a story around failed profitability or failed revenue generation. To be clear, I think there's a lot of great products within the space of neobanks. There's a lot of innovation that's improved the lives of consumers. But we also have to recognize, right, that the model they were pursuing in terms of add-on revenue, meaning deliver a core service and then they do add-on revenue generation from doing upsells for additional services, assuming consumers will be willing to pay for that. That whole model has not been proved yet. Among the neobanks who are claiming profitability are Starling in the UK.
Yeah.
However, their profitability came through their business customers, not their retail consumers.
Yeah, yeah.
So basically, that's a case where the offset assumption was to generate revenue from add-on sales. So there's a case there where you likely would have to revisit that model to review whether there's a different path they need to pursue.
So it's interesting, right? In terms of product speak, let's say it's a hypothesis that didn't pan out, actually, that people would pay a lot extra for services. So this, by the way, reminds me of I ran a startup and I couldn't raise a Series A in the end. One of the items that investors were talking about is that we hadn't proven a solid way of making money. And if I had to go back, or at least from then onwards, I've always focused on making revenue early. And, it doesn't matter if your revenue is, big or small. What you need to prove to yourself, actually, to starters, but then also, to investors, to everyone else, is, are you able to convert the value that you create into monetary terms? And it's an interesting one because a lot of, a lot of things are like build it and they will come, or, generate traffic first, which has value. But also you need to de-risk quite early. And we said this just a few minutes ago. De-risking early the revenue path is actually, I think, quite high on my agenda these days.
And obviously there are cases where your product doesn't merit monetization review in the early phases, but at some point during a product life cycle, 99% of products will have to face that head on. And to your point, testing an experimental approach is very often a very good way of approaching that. As a product leader, you need to review what's your business model. What are you selling in effect, right? One thing is user growth, but your business model might be more justified towards advertising, right? Where you're selling eyeballs. So you're basically selling the users or the data. Is it a subscription model? Is it a one-off license fee? Is it freemium? And then to your point, you just flagged around testing, right? You're not going to get clear answers in the product boiler room. You have to get out there, test your hypothesis, ask users, and see what they are receptive to. Never forget that monetization is a continuous effort. It never stops. As you evolve your product, your
Yeah,
business model also evolve, right?
spot on.
And then the last one is ask for the credit card number. I'll kind of leave that to you, Christian, to put words to that, because I think that's a
That's
nice
it.
wrapper.
That's it. That's what I said earlier. You know, ask for a credit card number. And if nobody wants to give you the credit card number, then your product is great for yourself, but apparently not for others. So I would say that's the ultimate test, basically. Yeah.
And I think that's a nice wrap up for today's discussion, right?
Cool. Thank you, Jonas.
Thank you very much, Christian. Until next time.